Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining Family Caregiver Alliance for our webinar on Managing Mom's Money, Understanding Financial Caregiving, presented by Naomi Karp. This webinar is open to caregivers and professionals. CEUs are available through the Board of Behavioral Sciences. In order to obtain your continuing education credit, please email me at adugai@caregiver.org with your name and your license number or other ID number. I am AJ Dugai, the Education Coordinator for Family Caregiver Alliance. Let me give you a little background on our organization. For over 35 years, we've been working through the Bay Area and across the nation to improve the well-being of family caregivers that are providing long-term care. We offer support through educational classes, workshops, fact sheets, retreats, caregiver support services, research, caregiver advocacy, and more. For more information, please visit us at www.caregiver.org. For the duration of the presentation, your phones will be muted. If you have any questions, you may ask them throughout by going to the GoToWebinar question box on your screen. These questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. After the completion of this webinar, you will be directed to a survey. Your feedback is very important to us in shaping our future education programs, so we would like to thank you in advance for filling those out. Today's speaker is Naomi Karp. She is the Older American Senior Policy Analyst at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Office for Older Americans, working on elder financial exploitation and retirement planning issues. Her work has a particular focus on the impact of diminished decision-making capacity on the financial security of older adults. From 2005 to 2011, Karp was a policy advisor at AARP's Public Policy Institute, where she conducted research and supported advocacy regarding elder abuse, guardianship, advanced care planning, and other legal rights issues. From 1988 to 2005, she served on the staff of the ABA Commission on Law and Aging and previously was a legal services attorney. She holds a JD from Northeastern University School of Law. Without further ado, I'll now turn things over to Naomi Karp.
Thanks, AJ. And sorry, I was having a little technical difficulty getting the slides to advance, but I think we're okay now. So, AJ, do you want me to go back to that slide about the CEUs any longer?
Oh, no, that's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so this slide just shows a disclaimer that I am required by my agency to show you, and it's just saying that I'm presenting it on behalf of the Bureau, but it's not legal advice. And obviously it was used in support of a live discussion, so the slides are not going to contain everything that I have to say. So enough of that. So let me tell you all a little bit about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because we are a very new agency and there's still a lot of folks out there who don't know anything about it, and there are certain things about it that can be helpful to you, partly to put my work in context, but also some tools and other publications for all of you consumers out there that I will touch on mostly at the end of the presentation. So the Bureau is a federal financial regulatory agency. We were created after the big financial crisis, in the late 2007, 2008, 2009. In any event, we were part of the Dodd-Frank Act, and we opened our doors in July of 2011, so that just makes us 3 years old, and I've been here pretty much from the beginning, which has been pretty exciting, setting up a new agency. The mission of the Bureau is to improve or make the markets for consumer financial products and services work for all Americans, regardless of what kind of financial product they are dealing with. And so what we mean by consumer financial products and services are things like banking, checking accounts, credit cards, mortgages, but some other things, payday loans, debt collectors, pretty much any kind of a retail transaction that involves money. So we make regulations, we enforce those, we go against companies that may be violating the law, but we also have a big function of education. And consumer financial education, basically from the cradle to the grave, is something that we do. So our office, the Office for Older Americans, is one of 4 special population offices that we have. These are for segments of our society who Congress thought needed a little bit of extra help to make sure they were fairly treated in the financial marketplace and that they were handling their finances. So the Office for Older Americans is tasked with helping consumers age 62 and over to get the financial education and training that they need. And it's really in 2 kind of buckets of issues. The first we call unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices aimed at seniors. This can be everything from, you feel like your bank or the mortgage company discriminated against you because of your age, to any kind of financial abuse and scams, abuse from strangers, could even be from in another country, getting to you by internet or phone, but also those closest to you and people you trust. So that's the one bucket of issues. The other is more generally to help older people make sound financial decisions as they age. So that covers a whole range of retirement and later life economic questions. When should I retire? When should I claim Social Security? Can I afford to stay in my house? Should I move somewhere else? Should I get a reverse mortgage? How will I finance long-term care if I need to someday? So those are all hard decisions that older people need to make, and our job is to learn about those things and to put out some products and guidance that will be useful for older Americans. We like to say we're the only office in the federal government specifically dedicated to the financial health of older consumers. So you can see we have a big job, and there are only about 8 or 9 of us in the office, so we're pretty busy. So moving on, just to tell you a little bit more about what our office is doing. I described, we're developing these education initiatives on financial exploitation and scams and retirement. We're also coordinating with other federal and state regulatory agencies and law enforcement. So, for example, we get together with some of the other federal agencies who also do work in this area, and we might create some products jointly or develop a regulation together or just learn about what we're each doing. We also might work with your state attorney general if your attorney general has a consumer protection function, and even your state and local law enforcement. We also do a lot of collaborating with community leaders and local organizations, and we go all over the country to meet with them and to try to come up with some shared agendas. So now let's get down to what we are really here for today with that background. And you see on this slide a photo of these 4 guides that we've created called Managing Someone Else's Money. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that. So one of the problems that we saw, and some of us have been working in aging for a while, so it's something we've been tracking, is that a lot of older adults, and this also can apply to younger people with disabilities, may have a declining capacity to handle their own finances. And this may make them vulnerable. So just a little bit on that. When we talk about capacity, there are a lot of different kinds of capacity. In addition to a capacity to handle your finances, there are also your capacity to decide where to live, or managing your own health care choices, managing your activities of daily living. And the capacity to handle finances is made up of different things: your ability to do arithmetic, your ability to manage a bank account, understand how the stock market works, and also it includes the capacity to understand or pick up on when something is a fraud or a scam. So financial capacity is actually the first type of capacity to go as people's cognitive functions change. And so even when people have just mild cognitive impairment before getting a full-blown dementia like Alzheimer's disease, their financial capacity is often going. And these folks often look put together. You know, they're still handling most of their decision-making, but if you look closely at their finances, you might see people starting to, you know, forget to pay bills or write the same check twice because they didn't remember they did it before. And a lot of people out there have mild cognitive impairment. In fact, 22% of people over age 70 have mild cognitive impairment. So that's a lot of people. So people in that situation, or also people who might have never had the capacity, either because they were born with some kind of a intellectual disability or something, they often need a surrogate to handle their money. And for purposes of today, we refer to those people as lay fiduciaries. We say lay because they're not professional. We're talking about family members, friends, caregivers, like I'm sure a lot of you on the line may be caregivers. And this, we're kind of talking about, we like to call it financial caregiving, because it's not the other activities of daily living and bathing and eating, it's the financial part. So these lay fiduciaries, and fiduciary we'll discuss in a minute, they are a critical source of help to people with diminished capacity, but often they really have no training or experience in how to manage someone else's money. And I've seen that in my family and friends as well. You know, someone may not even be that on top of their own finances, and suddenly they find themselves in a position that they have to handle someone else's money, and they have a heightened responsibility because they have some legal duties to that person. So as I said, a lot of them don't have any training, and unfortunately we all hear the stories about some people in that position even commit fraud. And we will touch on that a little bit later. But our premise for the point of these guides is that most fiduciaries and most family members really are trying to do the right thing. They just may not understand that they have some legal duties and they can't violate the rules of the road. So that's what we're hoping to show them in these guides. So the initiative was, we released this set of 4 managing someone else's money guides, and the reason we have 4 is because there are 4 types of fiduciaries we're trying to help out. Agents under powers of attorney, court-appointed guardians, or in your jurisdiction they might be called conservators or something else, trustees, people who are managing a trust, and then government-appointed fiduciaries. So that's, for example, Social Security calls them payees, and the VA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, calls them VA fiduciaries. So we tried to make them plain language, not too long, and very specific to their situation. And now we're going to drill down a little bit more on what these different terms mean, and then what the duties are that we explain in the guides. So what's a fiduciary? It sounds like a big legal word. It's anyone named to manage money or property for someone else. That's pretty simple. But it is a legal concept, and that person is given legal authority to stand in the shoes of the incapacitated person. And people need to take that seriously. So let's go through these roles. You may know some of this, but just so we're all on the same page, what's a power of attorney? And I'm sure you've heard of them. And some of you may be the agent for someone else, and some of you may have created a power of attorney yourself. So power of attorney is a legal document. In this scenario, let's talk about mom. Mom made a power of attorney to give to her daughter, to give her daughter legal authority to make decisions about her money and property. So the daughter then can make those decisions if mom is sick or injured and can't do it herself. Daughter's called the agent. And the document will list all of the powers and the authority that the daughter has in handling mom's money and property. And just to point out, there is another kind of document called a healthcare power of attorney. You may have heard it called a healthcare proxy or an advance directive. A healthcare power of attorney is different. That is when you give someone else authority to make healthcare decisions for you if you can't, either because you're too sick or you have dementia or something like that. And it has some similarities, but it's different, and that's not what we're going to be covering today. So let's talk about a couple of the others. What is a rep payee or representative payee, and what is a VA fiduciary? Government agencies like Social Security or the VA who are paying benefits to someone, let's call her mom, they may appoint someone to manage mom's benefits if she needs help managing them. So the Social Security Administration calls it a rep payee, the VA calls it a VA fiduciary. Now, what's different about these than a power of attorney? In a power of attorney, mom created the document herself, very possibly with the help of a lawyer, but nobody's imposing it on her. She's voluntarily making a decision she wants to do that. With these government fiduciaries, the government agency is making a determination that mom needs someone to help her, and they're appointing the person. And that person only has authority to manage mom's benefit checks, not any other property or finances. So, for example, let's say mom had got Social Security, disability, or retirement, and then she also had a pension from an employer she used to work for. The rep payee can only handle the Social Security check and spend it for mom's needs. They can't handle her pension or a house that she may own or that type of thing. So it's a little more limited in terms of who or what money they're managing. So what's a guardian? And I know maybe some of you are from California where it's called a conservator. A court names someone to manage mom's money and property if the court makes a finding of fact based on evidence that she can't manage it by herself. Now, the court also might determine that the person cannot make personal decisions like health care or where to live or should they go in a nursing home or, who should they hire to help them. And that would be called a guardian of the person. And the court might give both functions to one person, or they might make one person the guardian of property and another person the guardian of the person. And clearly, if there's more than one, it's going to be important for them to work together because money decisions and other decisions are very closely linked. So that's guardian. And what's a trustee? Well, trusts are a little bit more complicated. We're talking about something called a revocable living trust today. And what happens there is that mom signs a legal document, most likely drawn up by a lawyer. The document is called a living trust. And in the trust document, she names her son, let's say, to be her trustee. She also transfers ownership of some of her money and property. It could be all of it, it could be only a portion of it, into the trust. So then the trust owns the money. The trustee is managing the money and can pay bills and make other property decisions and so forth if mom can't do that anymore. And then there are people who are beneficiaries, and usually we think of the beneficiaries being the person who gets the remainder of the money when mom dies. So it tells what happens to the money in the trust at that point. So a trust is a little bit like a power of attorney because you initiate it yourself, you go to a lawyer and you have it drawn up, as opposed to a guardianship or a government fiduciary where someone else makes that decision. So just to give you an idea, how many fiduciaries are there out there? Like, is this really a big deal, or are we only talking about a few people? Well, we don't have really great numbers and data on all of this, but we can give you some examples. It really is a lot of people. So for Social Security, we know that in fiscal year 2012, over 4 million adults had representative payees. The VA, the numbers are a little lower. So about a year ago, the VA said that more than 152,000 beneficiaries of VA benefits had VA fiduciaries. Now, agents under power of attorney are undoubtedly the most common. The Federal Reserve did a survey about a year or two ago, and they found that about 35% of people over age 60 have made a power of attorney. That would come out to about 22 million people. Now, those people may not yet be acting as agent because the person may still be fully competent, but they're all appointed and they're out there ready to do their service. And finally, guardians. It's hard to tell with guardians because every state has its own court system and its own laws, and then within the state there may be different practices around the state from one court to another. But the best estimate we have is that there's somewhere between 1.5 and 3 million people with a court-appointed guardian. So, and I often like to think of that as that 1.5 million number is about the same as the number of people who reside in nursing facilities or nursing homes at any one time. And we know we pay a lot of attention to nursing homes and their regulations and making sure they're safe. So same number of people, we need to make sure that they're safe and that they're well taken care of. So now let's talk about the 4 basic duties of a fiduciary. And this is where in the guide, after we've explained the background and explained what these terms are and done kind of a glossary of terms and given the basic concepts, then the first meat of the guides are what are these 4 basic duties. And we've translated some complicated legal terms like the prudent investor rule and other things into more plain language so people can understand them. So the first duty we talk about is act only in mom's interest and avoid conflicts of interest. So we talk about a number of things in that section. Part of acting in mom's interest is involving mom in the decisions to the extent that she's still able to make decisions. And even if she can't make and communicate decisions well, pay attention to what mom wanted and try to make decisions along the lines of what she would have wanted in addition to looking out for her best interests. So what are we talking about here when we talk about conflicts of interest? And we give a couple of examples of things that may be conflicts of interest. So the first scenario is you're the agent under power of attorney, you're managing mom's money, and you buy a car. And you say, well, I'm going to use this car to drive mom to the doctor when she has doctor's appointments, and maybe occasionally I'll drive her to a social engagement, but the rest of the time I'm going to keep that car in my driveway and I'm going to use that car for things that I need to do. So question, is that a conflict of interest? You are using it for mom's benefit, but most of the time you're using it for your own benefit. So that may be a conflict of interest for you to decide to spend mom's money on that car rather than your own. So here's another example. Let's say mom lives in a house and, the porch is crumbling or the paint is peeling or whatever. Her house needs some repair and some upkeep. Well, your son happens to be a carpenter, a freelance carpenter, so you hire your son to do the job. Now, is that a conflict? Maybe, because you're giving your son preferential treatment, and maybe you're paying him more per hour than the going rate, but you want to throw business his way. That might not be in mom's best interest. So those are just the kinds of things we hope people will think about. So the next duty is managing mom's money and property carefully. And here we're talking about things like when you first take over the finances, do an inventory. Just do a review of everything she owns. Look at her bank accounts. Look at any real property she may own, cars, jewelry, whatever. Look at any loans that she might have, any debts that might be outstanding, and just make that list so you know where all her property and money is and how much she can afford to spend and so forth. If she has some property, it would be your responsibility to make sure that it's insured. You need to pay her bills and her taxes on time. And here's one that people might not think of. You want to maximize the income that mom has. So you may want to check out and see whether there might be some public benefits that she's entitled to that she's not receiving. And we give a link in the guides to an organization that does a benefits checkup. You can do a benefits checkup online and see if there's something else that mom might be entitled to. So thirdly, we say keep mom's money and property separate. And you want to do that because you want to make it really clear what's mom's money and what's your money, and that nobody is going to think you're doing anything wrong spending mom's money for your own benefit. So separate is separate. It's best to avoid joint accounts. We know joint accounts are very convenient, but you should be, let's say, writing checks on mom's account as mom's agent, but it's still her account, her money. Pay the bills out of mom's money. And finally, keeping good records. Well, again, this is kind of related to the one about money and property separate. You want to always be able to show how the money comes in, how the money goes out, and what the money is spent on. So keep lists of what you receive and what you spend. Keep the receipts. Try to avoid paying in cash or from the ATM machine because it's a lot harder to show what you spent the money on. So you want to be able to, if somebody ever questions whether you're doing the right thing, you want to be able to show them that, and that's how keeping those good records will be helpful. So that is a big chunk of what's in the guides. So now let's talk about the next section of the guide, and that section is about protecting mom from financial exploitation and scams. Because you, as mom's fiduciary, the person taking care of mom's money, is in a position to understand what kinds of threats she might face, financial exploitation or scams from third parties. So you want to make sure that no one gets mom's money or property through that. You want to protect yourself, and you want to have an understanding of what would not be okay for you personally to do. So there are a lot of reasons that this information would be important. So just a basic definition, financial exploitation is the illegal or improper use of an older adult's funds, property, or assets. Very simple. It's theft, it's extortion, it's identity theft, it's burglary, it's all those kinds of crimes. So financial exploitation is just one form of elder abuse because, of course, there's physical abuse, there's neglect, there's emotional or sexual abuse, but financial abuse has been getting a lot of attention because it's the most common form of elder abuse. One study showed that of adults age 60 and over living in the community, about 5% of them had experienced major financial exploitation by a family member. So that's even without the scams and the frauds and so forth. But the other thing is that only a small fraction of these incidents of scams or abuse are actually reported to any agency that could do something to help or protect the victim. So another study called Under the Radar, it was a New York State study, showed that for every case of elder financial abuse that gets reported, there's another 43 cases that never get reported. So it's really hard for us to assess how big of a problem this is because so many cases just stay hidden because the person may be incapacitated or isolated, or they might be afraid to report it, or they're embarrassed. So lots of reasons there. So clearly you know that the perpetrators of this kind of abuse can run anywhere from financial members, paid caregivers, scam artists, possibly different types of professionals who help people like financial advisors, stockbrokers, lawyers. It could be the home repair contractor who comes to your door and then rips you off. It could be these fiduciaries and lots of others. Older people make attractive targets because they've been gathering up a nest egg and perhaps building up a lot of equity in their home, and they're going to have to live off that for the rest of their lives. It's a significant amount of money, but it's really tough if somebody rips them off because they are not in a position to earn the money back. So we list here some reasons that older people may be vulnerable, and cognitive decline is one that I would really circle because when people are not really on top of things and not understanding that someone may have a bad intent, those people are really targeted. And then you see some of the other vulnerabilities there. So let's just go quickly, a few common signs of financial exploitation. Let's say you're your mom's agent or her guardian and you see that some money or property is missing. Well, that's the most obvious one. You might also see sudden changes in mom's spending or savings, trying to wire large amounts of money because they're convinced that they've won a lottery and they just need to pay their upfront fees or taxes and then they'll get the $1 million. It could be seeing that all of a sudden there are a lot of ATM transactions, but you know that the person whose money it is may be homebound or not able to get around and doesn't use the ATM. Or maybe mom starts making gifts that are unusual for her to a new person on the scene, her new best friend. Perhaps mom seems to be acting afraid when they're around a certain relative or a caregiver or someone else. And maybe someone is isolating mom and keeping her from having visitors or phone calls. Those are just a few of the signs. There are many more. What can fiduciaries do if mom has been exploited? Well, you have a whole list here. Probably the most important, or the first bullet, call Adult Protective Services. And depending on what state you're from, there may be a statewide hotline that you call, or in other places it's at the county level. And in our Managing Someone Else's Money guides, in the back, the resource section, we give you hints and contact numbers for how to identify these in your state or local area. Depending on what's happened, it's also a good idea to alert the bank, the credit card company. If you know it's a crime, you might want to call your local prosecutor or district attorney, or your state attorney general may have a consumer protection function. If the person is living in assisted living or a nursing facility, you could get the long-term care ombudsman involved, and that person will advocate for the resident. And if a lot of money has been stolen, you might want to talk to a lawyer about any prospects for being able to get the money or property back. We call that restitution. And what about scams? So when we say scams, we're talking about things that are usually from someone you don't know, someone who's calling you, who's emailing you, who might be knocking on your door, sending you, fantastic offers in the mail. And here are some tips to prevent against scams. First of all, put mom's number on the do not call registry. That will just apply to businesses and corporations, but sometimes they scam people, so keep them from calling. Be very careful about security and privacy. Don't share numbers or passwords for accounts or credit cards. We always say, if someone's offering you a deal, does it sound too good to be true? Well, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't true. There's probably a catch. And then a lot of tactics are kind of rushing you. I can give you something great, but it's only good today. You only have an hour. You don't want to miss this opportunity. That's a sign that they're pressuring you to do something that's not really legit. And then finally, we always like to say never pay up front for a promised prize. So again, if you've won the lottery and all you have to do is pay me this money first and then you'll get the money, bad sign. So we've talked about the guides, and here we have a link for how you can download these guides from the CFPB's website. Our website is consumerfinance.gov, and if you go to our Older Americans page, you will see links to the 4 Managing Someone Else's Money guides. If you want to get hard copies, you can also order those online, and we have a link here as well. And you can get free bulk orders. So if you are a professional or a service provider, order some stacks of these to give out to your clients or your customers. We've been talking them up to everything from senior centers to legal services or elder law attorneys, banks, credit unions. There are just so many people who have the opportunity to give these out, and they have been very popular. In fact, we were lucky enough to have these guides featured in a Dear Abby letter, and we got 75,000 requests from across the country and maybe around the world in the next day and a half after the Dear Abby letter went out. So that was really a great thing for us. So we have one next phase of this project, and that is to create some state-specific guides, and you see those 6 states on the screen. These guides will be different in that they will make reference to some of the state laws that might govern this. So perhaps one state has a guardianship process where the guardian of the property has to file a report every year. And another state, it could be every 6 months or something like that. So we include that material. We also, in the Where to Go for Help section, we give all the state-specific addresses and phone numbers and names of the agencies. So we are encouraging people in other states to take the guides and adapt them for their state. So we're going to be putting out a little what we call replication manual. It'll just be kind of tips and a template for how to adapt this for your state. So we hope some of you will want to create guides for your state if you take a look at these and you think they're good. So I don't want to take up too much time because I want to leave some time for your questions, but I want to just tell you quickly about some other initiatives and products that our office has, and then a couple of resources at the Bureau. So the first is our Money Smart for Older Adults Prevent Financial Exploitation project. This is a consumer education module. Again, it is geared for lay people. It goes over a lot of the common scams and frauds, how to be prepared for disasters, how to make sure that you have your financial information in a place where someone could find it. So we have a participant guide for the direct lay audience. We have an instructor guide, and we have a PowerPoint. And we use a train the trainer model. So we've been doing these trainings all over the country, and then people can go back in their communities and put on a program. So if any of you are, work in a area agency on aging or in a senior residence or anything like that, you can become a trainer and use our materials. Again, they're all free. You can get them the same way you get the other ones. The Know Your Financial Advisor is a little consumer guide for people who are wanting to choose a financial advisor. And a lot of people are out there with hanging a shingle or with a card saying they have expertise in senior issues. But sometimes it's not really based on any real training or education or licensing. So we want to give people some tools and tips for how to distinguish between people who are marketing themselves for something, but it's not really a good credential, from the people who really are experts in that. Then we have a reverse mortgage guide. You may know about reverse mortgages, which people age 62 and over can take, and it's a way to get back some of the equity that you've built up in your house. But there are some pitfalls there, and you may not choose wisely. So we again try to walk consumers through the pluses and minuses and the questions to ask. We have a manual for people who operate and work in assisted living and nursing facilities. And again, it's all about financial exploitation. It gives the facility a protocol for how to have a team and how to look out for exploitation and catch it early. Tips for community education programs, a lot of the things I've talked about today, but really geared specifically for that audience. So if you have a loved one who lives in one of these facilities, if you work in one, take a look at our guide. Again, it's free. You can order it. And then finally, we have a project on studying all of these coalitions and teams and networks around the country that are trying to fight financial exploitation. And we're studying them to see what works and what helps older people in those communities. And we'll be coming out with a report and a guide if you want to create one of those networks in your community or your state. Finally, and I know I'm going a little over, so I'm going to do this really quickly, we have something on our website called Ask CFPB. It's a very large set of questions and answers about all of these financial services and products. And it's searchable. You can search it by older Americans or by topic. We have over 1,000 questions and answers, and they might be helpful for you to answer some questions about your financial products and services in your situation. That's what the page looks like on our website. We also have a consumer complaint function where we accept complaints about those consumer financial products and services that we talked about before that the Bureau has jurisdiction over. We take a complaint, we get all the information we need, we forward it to the company, and we work to get a response from the company. And frequently the company, when they see their regulator knocking at the door, they will come up with some satisfaction for that consumer. And those can be filed online or by phone, etc. And that's what the Submit a Complaint page looks like. And that's the end for now, because I would like to leave it open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Naomi. That was some very helpful information, and I want to thank you for taking the time to share with us. We do have a few questions from the listeners, and if there are any other questions, you guys can send them in at this time. The first one I have is, what is the website to do a benefits checkup?
Okay. Let me see if I can find that quickly. It is run by the National Council on Aging, and here is the website. It's www.benefitscheckup, so that's all one word, benefitscheckup.org.
Okay.
benefitscheckup.org.
Thank you. And then the second question I have is, if I disagree with who is selected as the rep payee or VA fiduciary, can a request be made that someone else is selected?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not entirely clear on the process for that, but you can certainly reach out to Social Security or to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and they should definitely take information from you. If you're suggesting that the person who has been appointed is not appropriate or is not handling the money well, they do try to monitor the performance of those fiduciaries, but they have a very hard time monitoring them because there are so many of them. So I think they would appreciate getting a tip from someone in the public who thinks, you know, that it was the wrong person and who might be willing to serve themselves. So you should be able to contact Social Security and the VA. I'm just looking in our guides to see whether we have, yes, we have numbers for the Social Security Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs on one of the last pages in our guide. So take a look at the guide online, pull up those phone numbers, and pull up the right parts of those websites, and that ought to be helpful to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then the next question is, I want to protect my mom's house. If she should sign a quitclaim presented to her at the door, what would she do?
Okay, so I am assuming that the question is about some third party who might come and ask her to sign a quitclaim deed, which would be something turning the property over to that third person. Now, if this person's mom still fully has capacity, there's probably not a lot of protection, but if the person, you know, may have some diminished capacity, it would be worth discussing with the person, you know, whether you want to have something like a power of attorney or a trust set up and the home could be put in a trust. You know, it's going to be a lot of variation depending on the situation. That really sounds to me like one where you'd want to consult with an attorney, because there's also something called undue influence, where the person may still have the capacity to manage some money, but a third person is misleading and very persuasive and, you know, kind of almost brainwashing them, and they may do something that's against their interests. But that kind of thing varies from state to state. So I think it'd be a really good idea to talk to an elder law attorney or a trust and estate attorney within your state about that.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question I have is, what are the warning signs that someone may need help managing their money? How can I tell if I'm not actively involved in their finances?
That's a really good question. So if you're not actively involved in their finances, it is going to make it a little bit harder for you to understand, you know, are they handling their checkbook? Are they paying their bills on time? Are they sometimes writing the same check 3 times? You know, are they going to the bank and seeming confused, or are they starting to do some things with money that wouldn't be characteristic for them? Maybe they're suddenly investing a lot of money in something risky where they were always conservative before. Those are some of the kinds of behaviors that you would be looking for. So another thing that some banks are starting to do is to give a third party access to review the bank statements, so they wouldn't be actually on the account, but copies of their transactions could be sent to a third party, and that would be one way that you could monitor that. And the only way to really assess whether the person has lost the capacity to do it is to have some testing done. You might start with their family doctor, but you might be referred to a neuropsychologist or another mental health professional who could do an assessment. You know, we all want to know what are those bright line warning signs, but only a healthcare professional could really make that diagnosis. So I guess I would say it's hard if you're not, you know, perhaps you live far away and you're not really watching the finances, but I think just doing as much personal communication and questioning and talk to other people maybe in the family who are dealing with them, and just try to be a little bit of a detective about it. But, you know, it can be a very emotional thing, and people want to protect their privacy and may not want somebody nosing around in it. And even if they feel maybe they're not so on top of things, they may get even more defensive because they don't want to lose control. And so that can be tricky. So, you know, you may want to get some guidance on the best way to have these kinds of conversations.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a couple more questions. The next one is, if I can't obtain a power of attorney for my mom or designated as a signator on her account, how expensive is it to go to court and request to be designated as a conservator?
That's a good question. I can't give you a dollars and cents answer, but one of the things that we often say is a lot of people do want to avoid guardianship because it is expensive, it is time-consuming, it's also very public. You know, you have to go before a judge, it could be an open court, there are going to be court records, and people like to keep these things private. But sometimes we have no choice. So typically, if you did want to go to court and petition to become a conservator, we like to suggest that people do consult with a lawyer and perhaps have a lawyer represent them. It depends on your court and your jurisdiction. They may be helpful to people who are going to court without a lawyer, but you do have to understand, you know, what are the criteria for having the conservator appointed, and what kind of evidence might you have to present, and will you have to present medical evidence, which very frequently you would have to get a doctor or another clinician's signed statement or report. So it's kind of complicated, and then there are all the things about, you know, who do you have to give notice of the procedure and what are the timelines and stuff. So it really is best to contact a lawyer, and a lawyer in your jurisdiction who handles these kinds of cases could give you an estimate of what the fees would be. There are also going to be some filing fees, and if you're appointed, you may have to post a bond, which is going to cost you a little money too. So those are the things you need to look out for.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. And how does one create a state-specific guide on managing money?
Okay, so when I talked about these 6 state-specific guides that are coming out, we're also going to publish a little tips and templates guide, and it will just walk you through the different parts of the guide and tell you all of the places where you might want to look at your state law or your state procedures, you know, just flagging certain parts of the guide that are places where you might want to add some new information. The tips and templates guide will also talk about, you know, who would be good people to have. If you want to form a little committee or a task force to do this, it'll make suggestions about who would be good people to pull together for that effort, whether it be a state bar association. They often have committees or sections on elder law. There might be someone in the state office on aging, someone in the courts. So it'll just give you kind of a how-to in terms of steps, and also about where to look for the right content. we can provide some help with that too. So after that comes out, if you want to get in touch with us, we can give you a little technical assistance as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a question asking, what happens when someone is caught conning a senior?
Well, that's a great question too, because it's really variable. So typically if someone suspects that someone's being conned, financially abused, they would tend to, the places to report it, you know, the main places would be your state or county adult protective services unit, and if the person would be eligible for their services, they will do an investigation, and then they'll make a finding of whether they think in fact there was a con or a crime. If there was a crime, they'll probably inform law enforcement, and they may offer certain services to the person who was the victim. Now, if you go the law enforcement route, you know, what you really want is for them to do an investigation and to determine whether it's something they want to prosecute. Unfortunately, a lot of communities have, you know, not enough APS, Adult Protective Services workers, and the police may be very involved in violent crime, and sometimes they'll say, oh, this is a family matter, or it's not in our jurisdiction. But if you're persistent, hopefully you can get someone to investigate and then go from there. But also just to then educate and help the person who was conned so that hopefully it won't happen again, because sometimes once they've found a willing victim, crooks are going to go back to that same person. So you want to be protecting them going forward.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I have is, can you restate how one can get the Managing Someone Else's Money guide?
Sure. I'm just going to find that. I will read you that URL. Just getting to the right page here. So you can go to www.consumerfinance.gov/older-americans/. So consumerfinance.gov, older Americans, and just read the first few paragraphs on that page and it will link you to all of these documents.
Okay, thank you so much. That's actually all the time we have today for questions. Please feel free to contact me or email me if there are any questions that weren't covered. Thank you for everyone who has participated in this webinar. Thank you, Naomi, for sharing your wealth of information with us. And again, you'll receive a survey after you exit, and we really appreciate your feedback. Thank you, and this webinar is now concluded.
Thank you.
Thank you.